Well, today we're going to talk about power. The power within you. Most people are unaware of their inner, unseen, deeper level of life, and they don't realize it even exists. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore calls that the atom-smashing power of the mind. He says that we all have 12 powers within us and that we can and should use them at all times. They are, and I'm sure most of you know these, but I'll repeat them: faith, strength, wisdom, love, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, life, and release. It means the release of all that no longer serves us. The problem is that if we haven't developed our consciousness to be above the normal conditioning that most of us get, these powers are often blocked to our awareness. For example, love. We just can't love some people. We all know that. And even if we are capable of loving someone, often they can say or do something that triggers us and we no longer love them. So it isn't unconditional love. It's not agape love. I'd like to talk about power, mainly to remind you that you have this tremendous power within you, and I'm hoping that you can start using it in your daily life. A good first question might be, well, what really is possible if I use this inner power? Well, sages like Plato and Buddha and Jesus say the sky is the absolute limit, really. More recently, world-famous psychiatrist Dr. Carl Jung said that, and I quote, "We humans have the possibility of opening ourselves to a quality of life and consciousness that transcends anything in our ordinary experience." We begin to understand what human lives really can be. We begin to see things clearly and not through a glass darkly. For example, we begin to see our interconnectedness with all life and all beings. We begin to be able to love unconditionally, not just in an egoistic way that often causes us suffering. Dr. Jung says that this state of being is a transcendental state. Not many people know about this. He didn't write about this as much. He talked about it a lot, and professors have been recently teaching these later sayings of Dr. Jung. He was afraid the American people weren't ready for this. It's what Dr. Jung was talking about is what the American Transcendental Movement is all about, or was all about. Dr. Jung talked about that transcendental level of life by saying that it is a level of consciousness above the physical, above the mental, and above the emotional levels of life. He said that it is far more real, but that in Western culture, we have to a great extent lost the ability to access this level of life, this ancient wisdom that goes back at least to the ancient mystery schools. And I call to your attention the latest Unity magazine on the front cover, Reclaiming Ancient Wisdom. Unity has been on the cutting edge for over 100 years. And remember that Unity and the New Thought movement were founded largely on the Transcendental movement, one that includes the great wisdom of the East and the ancient Egyptians. Transcendentalism talks about the power within us, our intuitive power that modern culture has largely lost. Albert Einstein said, and I quote, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." This inner wisdom, this intuition, this power lie at the heart of all world religions, if they are properly understood. But unfortunately, religion is rarely understood by the masses because humans have inserted in them their human values. Religion is often, as we know from history classes, been used for political and power purposes, as when Emperor Constantine brought Christianity to Europe for purely political reasons. Thus, spiritual truths were relegated to what we call religion, replete with all kinds of dogma and rituals and dependence on leaders, like the divine right of kings and priests who served as intermediaries between the people and God. Humans thus gave away their power, and soon they forgot that they had ever had this inner resource. According to these ancient teachings that Dr. Jung and many sages have talked about, the universe has far more in it than we humans can see with our physical eyes. There are layers and layers of laws and influences that few see, and much less use. These levels of reality exceed what our minds can even comprehend. These energies and levels that are all around us are often depicted, though, in myths. Christian angels, saints, and demons, the vengeful God of Judaism, the 100,000 gods of Hinduism. Actually, I think it's 500,000, right, Katrina? The many Buddhas and bodhisattvas of Buddhism, and the myriad elemental energies of Taoism and the Egyptian mystery schools. All these figures symbolize the strength of the human psyche. They all symbolize something in our human psyche if we understand them, which Joseph Campbell did a good job of explaining. The teachings of the great traditions thus complement our findings in modern science, such as quantum physics and modern psychology, and show us how to navigate between these different levels of reality, the seen and the unseen world. All the teachings agree that our ability to live meaningfully and fully depends on our ability to negotiate these different levels and these different worlds out there, inner and outer, the seen and the unseen, the higher and the lower. For example, now modern man cheats himself by depending exclusively on his intellect or his body or his feelings. Dr. Jung and many sages have taught that it is time for us to outgrow this narrow view of reality. Fortunately, the search for transcendence and inner development is no longer considered fringe or new age or scientifically invalid. Some of the most established, intelligent, and successful scholars, scientists, and other people have been serious seekers: businessmen, politicians, artists, top professors, and scientists, as well as spiritual leaders. Books like The Tao of Physics, The Biology of Belief, The Grand Biocentric Design are updated versions of Fillmore's The Atom-Smashing Power of the Mind, which was written a century ago. Your innate power, the atom-smashing power of your mind, is your power to accomplish, your power to be able to love, your power to be able to establish peace and joy and abundance in your life. Now, this whole idea of power is fascinating, but it is sometimes confusing because we hear about power being a good thing, yes, but then sometimes we hear about power being a negative thing too. At Unity, you hear things like, discover the power within you, or you have unlimited power, or God's power is working through you. But then at other times, you hear expressions like, he's really on a power trip, or there is a power struggle going on in this organization, or church, or school, or family, or country. Or we hear the idea that power corrupts. So we get the idea that maybe power isn't a good thing. It's confusing. We may wonder, is power then good or bad? What powers do we really have as human beings, and what powers don't we have? What is the right and wrong use of that power? So I'd like to share with you the dictionary definition of power. Some of the definitions given are dominion, authority, the ability to act, the ability to exercise control, force, energy, capable of performing work. Each one is slightly different in its connotation, but basically what power means is the ability to direct energy to accomplish a desired result. One good example of power is in our government. You've got the President of the United States, and you have a secretary who types for some clerk in the postal service of the government. The president has absolute power. He or she can move around millions of people or billions of dollars with a signature or a phone call. Start a war even. The secretary, on the other hand, has little power. All he or she can do is just type what somebody tells her or him to type. Thus, from the human level, there seems to be varying levels of power. Some people seem more powerful due to their status or their jobs or wealth. However, in truth, we all have the same amount of power, and that is unlimited. We may not have realized our power to improve our earthly life, but we have that potential. All of us do, if that's what we want. It's a whole lot easier for some than others, of course, but the possibility is there, and millions have proven this throughout history, as I'm sure you've all read about. For example, the poor, uneducated, clinically depressed, homely Abraham Lincoln did not accept his limitations. He accessed his power to accomplish what he wanted to. Life has a limitless and infinite number of possibilities for the expression of the power that is within each one of us, all the time. The truth is, though, when you really think about it, we don't need more power. We simply need to use the power that we already have. And actually, we're already using that power in one way or another. We just need to learn to use it wisely. Most of us use that power on things that just don't even matter and might even be bad for us sometimes. So what should we strive for? Is not more power, but to use it in positive ways, ways that will truly help us and others. To learn how to use our power in positive ways, let's first look at how people often use their power in wrong ways, because we can learn a lot from their mistakes, as we all learn a lot from our mistakes. There are two ways we can use our power wrong. First, we can deny our power. Secondly, we can misuse that power. Let's talk first about how we deny our power. We do this as individuals, and we do it as a race, the human race. For centuries, humans have thought of themselves as lowly, inconsequential parts of the world, dust to dust, they say at funerals. Humans have been taught by the powers that be that God had all the power. Humans believed that they were powerless. It was a masterful way to control the masses. Then along came the scientific age, and science became our God. But again, we lacked power. With the scientific age, ideas sprang forth from people like Charles Darwin, who developed his theory of evolution, which spawned the idea that man is nothing more than an evolved species of animal. This is not, by the way, necessarily what Charles Darwin really said, but this is the idea that sprang from his theory that most people believe, that we were nothing more than intelligent monkeys scrambling around on the surface of the earth trying to eke out an existence. That doesn't do much for our self-esteem, does it? It certainly doesn't portray us as being one with this powerful universe. Now, I'm not trying to say that the theory of evolution is incorrect in essence, but so often we think we are only our bodies, nothing more than these animal bodies that we evolved into. About the same time as Darwin, along came a man named Sigmund Freud, who began to pioneer in a new area, into the human mind. Freud delved into what he called the subconscious. He developed ideas which were very enlightening at the time. But again, what sort of evolved out of these theories that the masses picked up was that we are controlled by this thing called the subconscious mind, which in turn was controlled by our past experiences, especially our childhoods, and that we had little control, little power after that. Again, I'm not trying to say that Freud actually said that. What I'm saying is that this is what his sayings evolved into, the public's interpretation of his theories, that we were essentially just subconscious machines, helpless victims, powerless, programmed by our parents and our past, and that we were absolutely powerless to do anything about it. Then, about 80 years ago, we entered a new age, the nuclear age, and with that came the possibility that we could totally destroy our physical selves beyond our imagination. We developed this Frankenstein-type monster, the atom bomb, and suddenly the monster became more powerful than its creator, like the Frankenstein story. Again, humans began to feel powerless. Now, there are, at this point in our history, there are all kinds of stories and movies about computers taking over their creators. Again, humans feel helpless and powerless. Humans are denying their power and their ability to control their own destiny. We deny our power when we put experts or authority figures in control of our lives. We grow up believing that they, in some form or another, have all the answers, much like the Germans put their faith in Adolf Hitler at one time. We think, well, there's nothing I can do. The government or scientists or authorities say it's this way or that way, so it must be. I can't fight City Hall. So we give away our power yet again. Now, I'm not blaming any of these authorities. They are just doing their job the best they can, and they're doing a very good job very often. But I am saying that we shouldn't give away our power. We must think for ourselves in every area. Many people who have been deemed hopeless, for example, by authorities, have used their personal power and won. Case in point, I bring this up every once in a while. I remember David Kramer, whom doctors had given up on, told David that he had a few months before he would be wheelchair ridden and probably 1 or 2 years and he'd be dead. That was 4 years ago. David's going strong. He's in my Wednesday night class. Contributes just absolutely on top of his game. He refused to let authorities tell him that he was powerless. Fortunately, in the last few decades, the trend has been changing, though. There is much more emphasis on self-reliance, holistic thinking, thinking out of the box, creating our own philosophy of life instead of depending on authority figures to tell us what to do, what to think, and what our limitations are mainly. Transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson said in his essay on self-reliance, and I quote, "Man does not stand in awe of himself, nor is the soul admonished to stay at home to put itself in communication with the internal ocean, but it goes abroad to beg a cup of water from the urns of men. We fail to recognize the ocean of power within, and we look outside ourselves for a mere cup of an answer. For example, we deny our power anytime we blame someone else for our problems. Think about it, because we are giving over our power to another person. It's his fault. He's got the power over my life. I'm powerless. Anytime we say, you make me feel this way, we're saying, you have all the power. When we say, woe is me, I've run into bad luck, I have no control over what's going on out there or in my life, we're giving away our power to the outside world. All these are examples of denying our power. Next, we have the misuse of power. We misuse power anytime we use it to inflate our ego. Today, we call that being on a power trip. When we use our power to prove that we are superior to or better than someone else, it's usually because we have a sense of inadequacy, which we then really would do well to work on for our own sake. We misuse our power when we use it to manipulate or control others. It's amazing, too, how often we do this without ever realizing it. When we try to manipulate or control others, we are actually denying our power and trying to make up for it by changing the outer world and outer people, because we feel like we've lost control if we don't. The reality is that the more we can control ourselves and our own lives, the less we feel a need to control others or to try to manipulate outer circumstances. Now, let's talk about the right use of power. Our greatest power is our ability to change our own consciousness. This truly changes absolutely everything in our lives. The very reality we live in, actually. We have the power of self-creation, and it's an awesome power. So how do we have the power of self-creation? Answer: by the choices we make, by what we choose to believe, by the thoughts that we choose to think, and the words we choose to speak. These things in turn develop our feelings and our attitudes, which in turn affect our bodies, the events in our lives, and finally our destiny, and ultimately life itself. These are the tools with which we change our consciousness. If we try to change the outer world without first changing ourselves, we are simply manipulating. But if we change ourselves first, truly change what's going on in our consciousness, we'll soon find that the world out there is changing. Someone else's might not, but our world sure will change. The right use of power is to express the Christ within, your highest self. It's not to impress other people. There's a big difference between expressing and impressing. Most of us grow up thinking that impressing others is very important. But what we're really doing is begging for that cup of water that Emerson was talking about, instead of recognizing the whole ocean that we have inside of us. You're saying, hey, if I act like you want me to act, you'll approve of me or you'll accept me. And we are again giving away our power to somebody else. We aren't even being authentic. We're being mere actors on the stage of life, as Shakespeare said. And this leaves us feeling pretty empty. When we find that ocean, that deep ocean inside of us and express it, then we are able to easily give to others what they really need. We're able to love others unconditionally, not simply use them to prop up our egos or fill up time or fill some void. We create authentic relationships. Ultimately, the right use of power is to serve others. A unity minister once said that he liked to think of himself as God manifesting as Bob. Thus, your name becomes a verb. You are God acting like your personality. You're in your costume, your body. You manifest spirit. Think thus that you are God, bobbing or Carlosing or Donalding or Katrina-ing or Susaning. The best way to really express God's power so that you can then manifest it in your life is probably the way our founder, Charles Fillmore, did, observing the silence, which he and Myrtle, his wife, did for an hour every evening. This is the way they experienced power. Meditation, observing the silence, prayer, that time in the day when you become one with the one power and one force of the whole universe. It cannot be explained in words. The intellect cannot grasp it. It just is. It's a paradox because we in the world think of power as movement or force or work of some kind. When something happens, we think of that as power. But the truth is that power is contacted and generated. That power is generated in you, in the silence, in prayer, meditation, and stillness. Power is in the center of your being, which is one with spirit, the oneness of all life. That's how you contact that power. We can read about power, we can talk about it, we can think about it, but ultimately it can only be experienced in those times of stillness. Ultimately, our greatest power, though, is to create ourselves. To do this, we need to be aware of how often we deny that power and misuse it. The right use of power is to become our full potential. Our potential is, as the Bible said, ye are God's. We need to recognize and express that, and in so doing, we will access the power within. This takes some time, of course, and some commitment. But in the meantime, what you can do, I suggest, is to express your power in small ways. It will help you develop your spiritual muscles. So in closing, I'd like to share a poem that expresses this idea, I think, masterfully. The author is unknown. Thank you for the little things. It's the little kindly things, the unobtrusive friendly things, the won't you let me help you things that make our pathway light. And it's just the jolly joking things, the never mind the trouble things, the laugh with me, it's funny things that make the world seem bright. For all the countless famous things, the wondrous record-breaking things, those never can be equaled things that all the papers cite, aren't like the little human things, the everyday encounter things, the just because I like you things that make things seem just right. So here's to all the simple things, the dear all in a day's work things, the smile and face your troubles things, the trust God to put them right, the done and then forgotten things, the can't you see I love you things, the I am with you things that make life worth the fight. May the force be with you.